Inside every human being, there is a battle that few ever admit, a silent conflict between the part of you that wants to rise and the part of you that quietly pulls you back into the darkness you came from. Sigmund Freud believed that humans are not simply driven by the desire to live, grow, love, or improve. He believed that deep within us there is another force, primitive, unconscious, and often invisible, that pushes us toward behaviors that destroy us, sabotage our progress, and make us repeat the same painful patterns again and again. And the most shocking truth is that this self-destructive drive isn't a mistake. It exists for a reason. Freud called this the death instinct, the inner pull toward chaos, comfort, repetition, and the familiar. According to him, people don't ruin their lives because they are weak or stupid. They ruin their lives because the mind is trying to return to what it already knows, even if that familiarity is toxic. A person who grew up around instability often seeks instability as an adult without realizing it. Someone raised in emotional distance may accept coldness as normal. Ha! Someone who learned that love equals pain may keep choosing the same painful relationships. It is not the conscious mind that chooses this. It is the unconscious recycling old wounds because the mind finds safety in what it understands. Freud believed the unconscious mind has only one goal: to reduce tension by repeating what is familiar. So people recreate their childhood struggles in adulthood not to suffer, but because their mind is programmed to replay the same emotional script again and again, hoping this time the ending will be different. That is why so many people date the same kind of person, fall into the same bad habits, or sabotage success right when it arrives. Their unconscious is trying to resolve an old story through repetition, but in the process, they end up hurting themselves. Self-destruction also comes from another force Freud identified: repression. Humans bury the emotions they are not ready to face. Anger, sadness, guilt, shame, desire, these get buried deep, but they don't disappear. Like steam in a sealed container, repressed feelings eventually burst out through destructive behaviors. Some people lash out at others. Some attack themselves. Some numb their pain through addictions. Some sabotage opportunities. Some stay stuck in cycles of procrastination, fear, or isolation. The destruction is simply the mind expressing what it cannot say directly. Freud believed that everything we avoid eventually returns with more force. If you avoid confrontation, the pressure builds until you explode. If you avoid sadness, it returns as numbness. If you avoid your past, it returns as patterns that trap you. And if you avoid your purpose, your life becomes filled with distractions that slowly eat away at your spirit. Self-destruction is not the desire to die. It is the desire to stop feeling what you don't know how to face. People destroy themselves because it is emotionally easier than confronting the deep wounds inside them. Another reason individuals are drawn to self-destruction, according to Freud, is the conflict between the ID and the superego. The ID seeks pleasure, escape, comfort, and instant gratification. The superego demands discipline, morality, and perfection. When these forces collide, the person becomes trapped between impulses and guilt. They chase something that gives temporary relief, then punish themselves with shame afterward. This cycle can create a life that oscillates between indulgence and self-hatred. The mind becomes both the prison and the punishment. People also destroy themselves because of unconscious guilt. Freud believed many carry hidden guilt from childhood, guilt for wanting independence, for rebelling, for having desires that were suppressed, for emotions they didn't understand. This guilt creates a belief that they do not deserve happiness, success, or peace. So even when good things appear, they sabotage them. They break what they love. They ruin opportunities. They walk away from people who care for them. Not because they want failure, but because deep inside they believe failure is what they deserve. Freud also said that humans run toward destruction because destruction gives them a sense of control. When life feels chaotic, when emotions feel unpredictable, and when the world feels overwhelming, people sometimes choose self-sabotage because at least it is predictable. At least they are the ones causing the pain, and causing your own pain often feels safer than waiting for someone else to cause it. A breakup you initiate hurts less than a breakup you fear. A dream you never pursue feels safer than one you might fail at. A risk you don't take feels better than a rejection you can't handle. So people restrict their own growth to avoid feeling powerless. Freud believed that self-destructive behavior is not a flaw, it is a message. a message that something inside you is unresolved, something is unhealed. Something is asking for attention. Maybe it's the inner child whose needs were never met. Maybe it's the version of you that was judged, ignored, or punished. Maybe it's the person you had to become just to survive. Self-destruction is the alarm system of the soul warning you that your inner world needs repair. People are drawn to self-destruction because destruction is easier than transformation. Building a new identity requires courage. Breaking old patterns requires awareness. Facing your fears requires strength, but destruction requires nothing. You simply let go. You fall. You collapse into what is familiar. And for many, that collapse feels like home. But Freud also believed that awareness is the beginning of liberation. The moment you notice your destructive patterns without judgment, you start weakening their power. The moment you realize you are repeating an old story, you can choose a new one. The moment you understand that your mind is not your enemy, but a messenger, you can begin healing instead of fighting. And healing, according to Freud, is the process of bringing the unconscious into consciousness. It is about seeing your patterns clearly, understanding where they came from, and choosing differently for yourself. You begin by noticing your impulses, the sudden urge to ruin a good relationship, the need to withdraw when things go well, the hunger for distractions when work gets stressful, the craving for old habits when you feel lonely or afraid. Instead of acting automatically, pause and ask, what is this urge protecting me from? What emotion am I trying to avoid? What fear is being triggered? What story from my past is being replayed? This simple act of awareness pulls your mind out of autopilot and into clarity. The next stage Freud believed in is expression. Repressed thoughts lose power when they are spoken, written, processed, or confronted. Anger that is acknowledged becomes manageable. Sadness that is felt becomes softness instead of a void. Fear that is expressed becomes a map instead of a prison, and guilt that is understood becomes forgiveness. When you release what has been buried inside you, the drive for destruction weakens because the pressure disappears. Freud insisted that healing requires honesty about your desires, your wounds, your fears, your mistakes, and your longings. Most people never heal because they keep lying to themselves, pretending they are strong when they are hurting, pretending they don't care when they do, pretending their past doesn't matter when it shaped everything. Self-destruction thrives on denial, but self-transformation begins with truth. As the unconscious becomes conscious, you start to see the real reason behind your choices. You realize that the people you choose reflect the love you think you deserve. You realize your procrastination is actually fear of judgment. You realize your anger hides sadness. You realize your addictions hide emptiness. You realize your self-sabotage hides a desperate need for safety. And once you see these truths, the spell breaks. The pattern loses its power. You are no longer controlled by impulses you never understood. Freud believed the final escape from self-destruction comes from integration, bringing the different parts of yourself together instead of letting them fight. Your wounded self, your ambitious self, your fearful self, your confident self, your child self, your adult self, they all want something. And when you stop ignoring one part of yourself, you stop being torn apart internally. Healing is making peace with every version of you that survived until now. When you become aware of your unconscious, when you stop repressing your pain, when you become honest with yourself, when you integrate your inner parts, you stop being drawn to destruction. You stop repeating the past. You stop sabotaging your future. And you begin to live not from fear, but from choice. Freud believed that humans are capable of transcending their destructive instincts when they cultivate self-awareness, emotional strength, and the courage to rewrite their story. The death instinct may exist, but so does the instinct for life, creation, love, and meaning. And when you strengthen that instinct through healing, introspection, discipline, connection, and purpose, you stop being pulled downward and start rising upward. Self-destruction is not destiny. Well, not destiny. It is a signal. It is the mind crying out for transformation, and the moment you understand your own depths, the moment you face the darkness inside you, it stops consuming you and becomes the foundation for a stronger, wiser, more conscious version of you. Pain becomes insight. Repetition becomes awareness. Fear becomes clarity, and the past becomes a lesson instead of a prison. You are not drawn to destruction because you are broken. You are drawn to destruction because something inside you wants to be healed, seen, heard, and understood. And the moment you start listening, truly listening, you begin the journey from unconscious sabotage to conscious power. You begin to reclaim your life. You begin to rise. Humans are fascinatingly complex, and one of the most puzzling aspects of our nature is the way we seem to undermine ourselves. We chase success only to sabotage it. We seek love only to push it away. We reach for our dreams only to stumble over the very patterns that have kept us safe in the past. Freud called this the repetition compulsion, the unconscious need to repeat old experiences, even when they cause pain. It's not masochism in the ordinary sense, it's the mind attempting to master what it could not understand in the first place. Every time we engage in a destructive behavior, we are unconsciously trying to rewrite the past, hoping this time it will resolve itself differently. And yet, because we act unconsciously, the outcome is usually the same: hurt, disappointment, and confusion. Imagine a person who grew up in a home where love was conditional. Praise was rare, criticism was constant, and acceptance had to be earned through obedience or perfection. As an adult, this person may find themselves drawn to relationships where love is elusive, validation is hard to come by, and emotional intimacy is a battlefield. They don't consciously seek pain, they seek what feels familiar. Their unconscious mind says, "This is home. I know how to survive here." Even if the conscious mind screams, "Why do I keep doing this to myself?" Freud believed that the unconscious is never malicious. It is merely operating with the information it knows, using patterns it has learned from early life. Addiction is another example. People often turn to substances, behaviors, or even thoughts that are harmful because they provide an escape from unresolved internal tension. Freud would argue that this is a negotiation between the ID, the ego, and the superego. The ID demands pleasure, relief, and comfort. The superego imposes rules, morality, and guilt. The ego, caught in the middle, struggles to mediate. When the tension becomes unbearable, the ego may allow destructive behavior as a temporary release. Smoking, drinking, gambling, overeating, or procrastinating are all ways to alleviate tension temporarily. The cost is high, but the immediate relief tricks the mind into believing it is safe. Self-destruction also appears in work and ambition. Many people sabotage their careers at critical moments. Freud would explain this as the unconscious defending against success that triggers internal conflict. Perhaps achievement threatens a deep-seated belief that they are unworthy. Perhaps it triggers fear of judgment, isolation, or exposure. The closer they get to success, the stronger the urge to self-sabotage becomes. This is the death instinct at work, nudging them back toward the familiar state of tension and struggle they have known for most of their lives. Freud also emphasized the role of projection in self-destructive behavior. Often, when people destroy relationships or opportunities, it is because they are projecting unresolved emotions onto others. They are not fully aware of the anger, resentment, fear, or guilt inside themselves. When these emotions emerge in another person or situation, it is easier to react externally than to face the truth internally. The unconscious mind says, "I cannot handle this inside myself, so I will act it out in the world." The world becomes a mirror reflecting the internal chaos we refuse to acknowledge. Childhood trauma, Freud believed, is perhaps the greatest catalyst for self-destruction. Early experiences shape the unconscious mind profoundly. Neglect, abuse, rejection, or shame become internalized rules about the world and oneself. I am not safe. I am not worthy. A love hurts. These messages are deeply encoded. As adults, people unconsciously repeat situations that confirm these beliefs because the unconscious mind assumes repetition is the path to mastery. The irony is that mastery is impossible until awareness intervenes. Fear, according to Freud, is another powerful motivator for self-destruction. People destroy opportunities or relationships because they are afraid of loss, failure, or even happiness. Happiness can be frightening to someone who has never felt secure, who has been conditioned to expect pain. By sabotaging what could bring joy, the unconscious mind maintains the predictable state of tension. Predictability feels safe even if it is painful. Freud also explored the ways in which self-destruction is linked to the pleasure principle. We are wired to seek pleasure and avoid pain, yet the unconscious mind sometimes subverts this principle. People may experience a masochistic satisfaction in destruction because it brings a perverse sense of order. When life is confusing, when emotions are chaotic, self-sabotage becomes a strange form of control. Even self-inflicted pain can feel better than uncontrollable, unpredictable forces outside oneself. The unconscious also thrives on secrecy. Self-destructive tendencies often remain hidden because acknowledging them requires courage. The ego resists exposing weakness, fear, or unresolved trauma. Denial and repression keep these tendencies buried, but repression only intensifies their force. Freud famously stated that repressed desires never disappear. They manifest in dreams, slips of the tongue, and behaviors we do not understand. Understanding these hidden motives is the key to breaking the cycle. Love and relationships are arenas where self-destruction plays out most vividly. People often choose partners who replicate the patterns of their parents or caregivers. They are unconsciously drawn to situations that confirm what they learned early in life about love and acceptance. This explains why someone might repeatedly fall in love with partners who are emotionally unavailable, critical, or unfaithful. It is not masochism. It is the unconscious mind seeking familiarity. Every rejection, betrayal, or heartbreak becomes a way to process unresolved feelings from childhood, a chance to attempt mastery over the unmastered past. Freud believed that confronting these patterns requires introspection and honesty. The first step toward liberation is recognition, seeing the behavior for what it is without judgment. When you recognize the repetition, you gain a choice. Awareness weakens the unconscious pull. The moment you understand why you act destructively, you can respond instead of react. Integration is the next step. Every part of the self, including the wounded and destructive aspects, must be acknowledged. The aggressive impulses, the fears, the insecurities, the desires, all are part of the whole. Freud believed that true psychological growth occurs when these conflicting forces are brought into conscious awareness and reconciled. Healing is not about erasing the destructive tendencies. It is about understanding them, transforming them, and redirecting their energy toward life-affirming outcomes. Therapy, Freud argued, is a pathway to disintegration. By exploring the unconscious through conversation, reflection, and analysis, individuals uncover hidden motives and unresolved traumas. They begin to understand the origins of their destructive behaviors. They learn that the death instinct exists, but so does the life instinct. They learn that destruction is not destiny. It is a signal, a message that the mind is trying to communicate. Self-destruction is also connected to guilt and shame. Freud observed that internalized moral judgments, often instilled in childhood, can create a self-punishing tendency. People believe they do not deserve happiness, love, or success, and so they undermine it whenever it approaches. This unconscious belief manifests as procrastination, self-sabotage, and destructive behavior. Liberation comes from forgiveness of oneself, of others, and of circumstances that were never under one's control. Ultimately, Freud saw humans as capable of transcending self-destruction. Awareness, expression, honesty, integration, and transformation allow individuals to reclaim their lives. Destructive impulses do not vanish overnight. They persist, but their power diminishes. By observing, understanding, and redirecting these forces, people move from unconscious repetition to conscious choice. Humans are drawn to self-destruction not because they are weak, but because their minds are trying to process unresolved pain. Every destructive act carries a lesson, every impulse points to a wound, every habit is a signal. Freud's insight reveals that the journey from self-destruction to self-mastery is possible for anyone willing to look inward, face the darkness, and bring unconscious motives to light. The path is not easy, but it is the only way to transform the destructive energy into creation, insight, and conscious living. To live fully, one must confront the death instinct within, recognize the pull of unconscious repetition, integrate the fragmented self, and reclaim the life instinct, the drive toward growth, creativity, love, and fulfillment. Self-destruction is not your fate. It is your mind's way of demanding awareness, and when you answer that call, you rise above the patterns that once held you captive, and you begin to live a life that is truly your own. Humans have always been a paradox. We reach for greatness yet stumble into the very traps that hold us back. We crave love but often push it away. We desire freedom yet imprison ourselves in patterns we barely understand. Sigmund Freud, the father of psychoanalysis, argued that this struggle is not accidental. It is the interplay of unconscious forces within us, some of which drive us toward growth and others that pull us towards self-destruction. To understand why people are drawn to self-destruction, we must first understand the architecture of the human mind. At the heart of Freud's theory is the division between the conscious and unconscious mind. The conscious mind is what we are aware of, the decisions we make, the thoughts we recognize, the plans we execute. But beneath this lies the unconscious, a vast reservoir of desires, fears, memories, and drives that we do not fully perceive. The unconscious shapes our behavior more than we realize. It orchestrates patterns, reactions, and choices that seem irrational on the surface. Much of self-destructive behavior originates here. Freud introduced the concept of the death instinct, a drive toward destruction and regression. While we are naturally inclined to seek pleasure and survival, there is also an innate tendency toward returning to a state of inertia, chaos, or even self-harm. This may sound terrifying, but Freud observed it in everyday life. People repeatedly sabotage their careers, their relationships, or their health. They chase dreams only to abandon them. They engage in habits they know are harmful. These behaviors are not random. They are manifestations of an unconscious desire to repeat, to return, to confront unresolved inner tension. One of the clearest examples is in relationships. Consider someone who grew up in an environment where love was conditional, only given if certain rules were obeyed, only offered after sacrifices, only granted when perfection was achieved. As adults, they may unconsciously seek partners who mirror these patterns. They may fall for individuals who are emotionally unavailable, critical, or inconsistent. They repeat the childhood dynamic because it is familiar, because the unconscious mind equates the known, even if painful, with safety. The conscious mind may rebel, demanding love and stability, but the unconscious mind pulls toward the repetition of old scripts. The mechanisms of self-destruction also appear in addiction. Addiction, whether to substances, behaviors, or even patterns of thought, is a way of managing unconscious tension. The ID, Freud's term for the primal pleasure-seeking part of the psyche, craves immediate relief from stress, anxiety, or pain. The superego, the moral and judgmental aspect of the psyche, imposes rules and guilt. The ego, the mediator, sometimes allows self-destructive behavior as a temporary escape. We see this in someone who drinks to numb emotional pain, gambles to feel excitement, overeats to comfort themselves, or procrastinates to avoid failure. Each destructive act provides a fleeting sense of control or relief, even as it perpetuates long-term suffering. Self-destruction is also rooted in repression. Freud believed that emotions and experiences we cannot consciously confront are buried deep within the unconscious. Anger, grief, fear, desire, these do not disappear. They manifest in indirect ways. When we avoid addressing unresolved pain, it emerges as self-sabotage, interpersonal conflict, or unhealthy coping mechanisms. The unconscious mind is constantly trying to bring what is repressed into awareness. Until this happens, we are bound to repeat the same patterns. Another dimension is unconscious guilt. Many people carry internalized guilt from childhood, sometimes rational, often irrational. Guilt for wanting independence, for asserting themselves, for desiring happiness. This guilt can create a self-punishing mindset. Even when opportunities for love, success, or joy appear, the unconscious mind may sabotage them. People end up undermining themselves not because they want failure, but because deep inside they feel unworthy. Freud observed this over and over. The mind often chooses punishment over fulfillment because punishment is familiar. Freud also highlighted the role of fear in self-destruction. People destroy themselves because they fear life's unpredictability. Fear of loss, fear of rejection, fear of failure, and even fear of happiness can all manifest as self-sabotage. Happiness can feel threatening to someone who has never felt secure. By destroying what could bring joy, the unconscious mind maintains a predictable state of tension. This is why someone may leave a fulfilling relationship or abandon a promising opportunity at the moment success is within reach. The repetition compulsion is a key concept in understanding self-destruction. Humans unconsciously repeat past experiences, particularly those that were unresolved, traumatic, or emotionally charged. The mind believes that by recreating the scenario, it can finally resolve it. Oh, and yet, without awareness, the cycle continues, often producing the same outcomes as before. This explains why people repeatedly choose the wrong partners, relapse into old habits, or sabotage their achievements. Each repetition is a chance to master the past, but without insight, it is merely a reenactment. Projection is another factor. Often, when people act destructively toward others, it is because they are projecting unresolved internal conflicts. Unacknowledged anger, fear, resentment, or insecurity is displaced onto someone or something else. The external world becomes a mirror for the internal chaos, and self-destructive behavior emerges as a form of unconscious communication. We lash out at others, undermine relationships, or make harmful decisions not because we wish harm externally, but because our own inner turmoil demands expression. Trauma, especially from childhood, is a major driver of self-destructive behavior. Freud recognized that early experiences leave indelible marks on the unconscious mind. Neglect, abuse, emotional deprivation, or excessive criticism creates deeply embedded beliefs. I am unsafe. I am unsafe. I am unworthy. A love is painful. As adults, people recreate situations that validate these beliefs, often unconsciously. The unconscious mind is not malicious. It is attempting to process what was unprocessed. Self-destruction becomes the vehicle for confronting unresolved trauma, though without guidance, the result is suffering. Freud emphasized that awareness is the antidote to unconscious self-destruction. The first step is to observe patterns without judgment. Recognizing the repetitive behavior allows the conscious mind to intervene. Understanding why we act destructively gives us a choice. Awareness transforms the unconscious pull into conscious decision-making. The destructive pattern loses its automatic power. Expression is another vital step. Repressed emotions must find a way to surface. Anger that is acknowledged loses intensity. Grief that is felt becomes manageable. Fear that is articulated transforms from paralysis into insight. When emotions remain buried, the unconscious finds indirect ways to express itself, often through self-destructive acts. By naming, expressing, and understanding these emotions, we weaken the destructive force. Integration follows awareness and expression. Freud believed that all aspects of the psyche must be acknowledged. The wounded, the fearful, the impulsive, and the ambitious parts all contain valuable information. Growth occurs when these fragments are brought into harmony. Healing is not about erasing destructive tendencies, but about understanding them and channeling their energy constructively. Therapy, self-reflection, and conscious introspection are pathways to this integration. Through these methods, individuals uncover hidden motives, unresolved trauma, and unconscious patterns. They learn that the death instinct exists, but so does the life instinct. Destructive impulses do not vanish, but their influence diminishes as the unconscious becomes conscious. Awareness transforms chaos into choice. Humans are drawn to self-destruction not because they are flawed, but because their minds are attempting to resolve what was never resolved. Each destructive act is a signal, a call from the unconscious for attention, healing, and integration. Pain is the teacher, repetition is the lesson, and self-awareness is the key to liberation. Freud believed that the ultimate escape from self-destruction comes from reclaiming the life instinct, the drive toward growth, creativity, love, and purpose. By observing impulses, understanding motives, integrating the self, and expressing repressed emotions, individuals move from unconscious repetition to conscious mastery. Self-destruction is transformed into self-awareness, chaos into clarity, pain into wisdom. The journey is not easy. The unconscious is powerful, patient, and persistent. The patterns ingrained in childhood are deeply rooted, but Freud's insight provides hope. Awareness, honesty, expression, and integration can break the cycle. You are not destined to repeat the past. The pull toward destruction is not a sentence. It is a message, a chance to evolve, a call to confront your inner world and reclaim your life. When you understand these forces, when you confront the darkness within, self-destruction ceases to control you. Instead, it becomes a guide, a reminder to pay attention, to heal, and to grow. Destruction gives way to creation, fear gives way to insight, and the unconscious becomes a source of strength rather than a prison. You rise not by fighting the mind, but by understanding it, integrating it, and consciously choosing a life aligned with your deepest purpose. Self-destruction is not the end. It is the beginning of awareness. It is the whisper of the unconscious urging you to listen, to learn, to transform. Freud's revelations show that within every destructive impulse lies the seed of insight, and within every repetitive pattern lies the opportunity for mastery. To be drawn to self-destruction is to be human, but to transcend it is to be awakened, conscious, and truly free.